Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're really going deep, cracking open Israel's Talmud for Jews, Christians, and Muslims.
Yeah, this one's going to be a wild ride.
It looks like it. Get ready for some, well, I mean, I was surprised anyway. Some unexpected twists and turns as we uncover some surprising connections between, well, these three major world religions, really.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how this source, it goes beyond just the surface level. You know, we're not just talking about, these religions share similar stories or prophets. It's like this deep dive goes like into the structure of religious thought itself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love that. Yeah, it's like we're comparing the architectural blueprints, right? Instead of just admiring the outsides of the buildings.
Yeah.
Speaking of blueprints, I think we have to start with the Talmud, right?
Right.
I'll admit, I always thought, okay, the Talmud, that's Judaism 101. But this source is saying it's like way more influential than that.
Right. The Talmud, it's often seen as like a companion to the Torah. So you've got the Torah, right, which includes the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Think of that as like the foundation. The Talmud is where things get really interesting. It's less about like the hard and fast rules and more about like centuries of debate, interpretation, stories, all built upon those like foundational texts.
So it's not just about what the Torah says, but how different generations of Jewish scholars have like wrestled with its meaning over time.
Exactly. And this is where the unexpected connection comes in. So like the way the Talmud is structured, with its layers of commentary and the debate back and forth, it actually mirrors how like Christians analyze the Gospels and how Muslims study the Hadith.
Wait, really? I never made that connection before. So when Christians are debating, okay, what did Jesus really mean when he said this? Or, Muslims are studying the Prophet Muhammad's life. They're using a method that basically echoes the Talmud.
Pretty amazing, right?
That's blowing my mind a little.
And, the source argues that this isn't just a coincidence. Because, like, for centuries, Jews, Christians, Muslims, they lived and interacted in the same regions, especially in the Middle East. And so this close proximity, it led to this kind of like cross-pollination of ideas.
Okay, so it's like instead of just borrowing a cup of sugar from your neighbor, you're borrowing like ideas and ways of thinking about your faith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about a figure like Paul of Tarsus. So he goes from a Jewish scholar to like this pivotal figure in early Christianity.
Yeah.
He brought with him that tradition of debate and interpretation, and it shaped how early Christians understood their faith.
It's like Paul was like a bridge between these two worlds. And speaking of bridges, the source also mentions some important figures in early Islam like Ka'b al-Ahbar and Abdullah ibn Saba, who seem to have played a role in this exchange of ideas.
Yes. Ka'b, he converted to Islam, and he is believed to have brought in like all these Jewish stories and interpretations into the fold. And then you have Abdullah ibn Saba, a much more, I'd say, controversial figure in both Sunni and Shia traditions.
Okay.
Often accused of, causing division. But his story, even shrouded as it is in controversy, still demonstrates how intertwined these faiths were at the time.
It makes you realize that the spread of religious ideas is rarely like neat and tidy. It's messy with like strong personalities and differing interpretations, and it's all playing a part, right?
Absolutely. And this is where our source makes a really bold claim. It suggests that it wasn't just the content of the Torah that had an impact, but the Jewish method of recording and analyzing those texts that rippled outward, influencing how other faiths developed their own traditions.
So it's not just about the what, but the how.
Exactly. Think about it. The Gospels, they present themselves as these firsthand accounts of Jesus's life, almost like if you were news bulletin spreading the word.
The Gospels as news. Okay, now that is fascinating.
It's a completely different way of looking at them.
Right.
And then you have the Hadith and Sirah in Islam, collections of sayings and stories about the Prophet Muhammad, also passed down through generations. These forms of like religious storytelling, they echo the Talmud's approach of debate and evolving interpretations.
It's like they took that blueprint of debate and analysis and applied it to their own like evolving understanding of their faith. That is a serious aha moment.
And it gets even more intriguing. The source points out that the words Mishnah and Gemara, which are like the building blocks of the Talmud, might actually have Arabic roots.
Wait, seriously? The core components of the Talmud having linguistic ties to Arabic, that opens up a whole other level of connection. This is getting good.
It really is. It suggests a level of historical intertwining that, honestly, we're only beginning to uncover. And that's what makes this deep dive so exciting, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like we're uncovering a hidden conversation between these faiths, one that's been going on for centuries. But this source doesn't stop at similarities. It also makes some pretty bold claims about historical distortions, especially when it comes to how certain prophets are portrayed. And that's where we'll pick up next time.
Picking up where we left off, you're right. This source, it does not tiptoe around sensitive topics.
Not at all. Last time we were talking about the Talmud maybe influencing these other religious traditions, but now it's like this source is diving into the deep end, right, with these claims of historical distortion.
Yeah, and this is where its analysis of the Quran gets really interesting. It points to verses that challenge that traditional narrative of certain prophets being solely identified as Israelite.
Okay, so break that down for me. What prophets are we talking about here, and what's the source's argument?
Well, it specifically mentions prophets like Noah, Abraham, Jacob. The source claims that the Quran presents a more nuanced view, suggesting that they belong to a lineage that predates the traditional, children of Israel.
So it's like this source is suggesting a whole different family tree for these prophets.
Precisely. And it even goes as far as to say that the Quran hints at a prophet named Israel existing long before the traditional 12 tribes, possibly even before Adam.
Wow, that's a big claim. So it seems to be suggesting a different timeline for these prophets, one that challenges the conventional biblical chronology.
Exactly. And the source argues that this reframing of history, it's intentional. It claims that by placing these prophets in a different lineage, the Quran is challenging the idea of the children of Israel being the central figures in prophetic history.
So it's not just about correcting the historical record, but also challenging a deeply ingrained narrative, like a way of seeing religious history that's been accepted for centuries, right?
Exactly. And the source goes on to accuse, who it refers to as the children of Israel, of distorting the stories of these prophets, even claiming that they twisted these tales to make figures like Noah, David, Lot seem immoral.
Why would they do that? What would be the purpose of making these prophets look bad?
The source suggests it's about power. That by casting these prophets in a negative light, certain groups could elevate their own status, claim a more central role in religious history.
It's a bold accusation for sure. So if the Quran is offering a different perspective on these prophets, right, one that challenges these alleged distortions, what does that mean for how we understand these figures today?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This source encourages us to approach these stories with a critical eye, to recognize that there are often multiple perspectives and interpretations at play.
It reminds us that history is rarely black and white, right? There's always more than one side to every story.
Absolutely. And this source argues that the Quran is actively engaging in this conversation, offering a different perspective on these prophets and their place in religious history.
That's fascinating. And it makes me wonder, if we start looking at these stories with fresh eyes, questioning our assumptions, what other hidden connections and complexities might we uncover?
That's the beauty of a deep dive like this. It's not about just accepting one interpretation as the truth, It's about opening our minds to different possibilities and engaging in a critical and thoughtful conversation about how we understand these texts and these traditions.
I love that. It's like we're being invited to become detectives of religious history, looking for clues and piecing together the puzzle.
Exactly. And the source even provides us with some intriguing linguistic clues, particularly when it comes to the words Mishnah and Gemara, which are the very heart of the Talmud.
Right. We touched on this earlier, but it's almost too juicy not to revisit. It's this claim that these words might actually have Arabic roots, which is a pretty shocking connection given how central they are to Jewish tradition.
It's definitely thought-provoking. The source suggests that Mishnah might be connected to the Arabic word for, to hate or to scorn.
And to make it even more intriguing, it links this back to the Quran, specifically Surah Al-Kawthar 3, which talks about those who hate being cut off.
Yes. And as if that wasn't enough, it goes on to claim that Jamara, which means embers in Arabic, could allude to the punishment, the fires of hell, awaiting those who are ostracized.
Okay, whoa. Now those are some bold interpretations. Connecting the core components of the Talmud to such, negative concepts is certainly a power move.
It is. And it speaks to the source's overarching claim that there's this, hidden system of control within Jewish tradition, the system that seeks to silence dissent and maintain power through exclusion.
So it's like this source is claiming that even the language itself, the very words used to define Jewish tradition, hint at this, like darker undercurrent. That's pretty intense.
It's definitely pushing the boundaries of traditional interpretation, and it challenges us to think critically about the relationship between language, power, and religious authority.
For sure. But it's important to remember this is just one perspective, one interpretation among many.
Absolutely. And it's up to each of us to engage with these ideas critically, to weigh the evidence and to form our own conclusions.
It's all part of the deep dive. Now, the source doesn't just limit its analysis to Judaism. It also draws some interesting parallels between this alleged system of exclusion and practices in other faiths.
You're right. It compares it to excommunication in Christianity, where individuals who go against church doctrine are officially excluded from the community.
So it's suggesting that this impulse to silence dissent or punish those who don't conform, it's not unique to one religion, but might be a recurring pattern across different faiths.
That's exactly the point it's trying to make. It's a reminder that these issues of power, control, the relationship between orthodoxy and dissent, they're complex, they're multifaceted, and they're present in various forms throughout religious history.
It's a sobering thought, but a crucial one to consider as we, delve deeper into these traditions.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the importance of critical thinking, open-mindedness when engaging with religious texts and history. We should never shy away from asking tough questions, even if the answers make us uncomfortable.
Well said. This source definitely isn't afraid to ask those tough questions, and it's given us a lot to think about already. But it's not done yet. We're about to dive even deeper into how this source claims Jewish traditions, particularly the methods of interpretation found in the Talmud, had a lasting impact on both Christianity and Islam. Okay, so we've explored some, really intense claims. Power structures, historical distortions, hidden meanings, wow. But now we're kind of shifting gears, right? Looking at how this source connects the Talmud to the development of both Christianity and Islam.
Yeah, and it argues that it wasn't just the content of Jewish scriptures that influenced these other faiths, but the Jewish method of, analyzing and interpreting those texts. It claims this approach, with its focus on debate and evolving understanding, had a ripple effect. It shaped how Christians and Muslims would later approach their own scriptures.
So it's like the Talmud. It provided a blueprint for how to engage with religious texts in this dynamic and evolving way.
Exactly. Think about it. The Gospels, those accounts of Jesus's life, they weren't always, written documents. They were initially shared orally, almost like, if you will, news bulletins spreading the word about this new and, radical message.
The Gospels as news? Okay, that's kind of brilliant. Never occurred to me to think of them that way.
Right. Reframes how we view those texts. And then there's the Hadith and Sirah in Islam.
Right.
Collections of sayings and stories about the Prophet Muhammad, also initially passed down orally. These forms of, religious storytelling, they echo that Talmudic structure. Layers of commentary, debate, interpretations, all woven together over time.
It's like this tradition of active engagement, right, of wrestling with the meaning of these sacred texts. It created this common thread between these faiths, even as they develop their own distinct beliefs and practices, right?
Exactly, and it highlights a key insight from this source. Religious traditions, they're never static. They're constantly evolving, being reinterpreted by each generation.
Yeah.
And I think, doing this deep dive has really made me appreciate that dynamism.
Me too. But this source doesn't shy away from controversy, right? We already talked about those claims of historical distortion, and it kind of doubles down when interpreting certain Quranic verses, especially those that deal with those prophets that we were discussing earlier.
You're right. It argues that the Quran, it challenges that traditional narrative of prophets like Noah and Abraham being, solely identified as these Israelite figures.
So it's suggesting that they belong to a different lineage, a tradition that predates the traditional children of Israel.
Exactly. It even points to a prophet named Israel existing long before the 12 tribes, potentially predating even Adam, which is a huge departure from those traditional biblical timelines. This source, it wants us to consider that the story of these prophets, it might be way more complex than we've been led to believe.
Yeah. It's like we're being asked to redraw the map of religious history, to consider different origin stories, different connections. That's a pretty wild thought.
It is. But it's also a reminder that our understanding of the past, it's constantly being shaped and reshaped by new discoveries, by new interpretations.
Okay, so where does this all leave us? We've covered so much. We went from the structure of the Talmud to the role of oral tradition to the complexities of prophetic lineage. This source has thrown a lot our way.
It has. But I think the key takeaway here is the importance of engaging with these texts, these traditions, actively and critically. This source, whether we agree with its conclusions or not, it forces us to ask those tough questions and to confront our own assumptions about these faiths.
It reminds us that these aren't just like dusty old books, but like living conversations that have been, going on for centuries. And we have the opportunity, even the responsibility, to join that conversation.
Beautifully said. And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Israel's Talmud for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. It's been, quite a ride. Challenging ideas, surprising connections, and, a lot of information.
For sure. Until next time, keep those minds open, keep asking those tough questions, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.